Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Collar here, and we've got a very interesting and unique story to talk about tonight that for the most part, when I've been asked about it over the last couple weeks, I've kind of been like, I don't know, man. I don't really know if I want to get too deep into that. Just doesn't seem like anything that the Vikings would do, so meh. And you know what? Today was reading around a couple of things about this Brendan Sorsby situation, the Cincinnati / now Texas Tech quarterback who was expected to be suspended by the NCAA. There's layers to that. There's an injunction. There's all sorts of things going on related to Brendan Sorsby, but now he will be entering the supplemental draft. So he has officially entered the supplemental draft. And the draft universe, the college writers, everybody's been sort of debating, well, where will he go? Which teams would be interested? Who should put in a draft pick for Brendan Sorsby? And the supplemental draft, basically the way it works is, think of it as trading a draft pick for the player. So if you use a first round pick in the supplemental draft, you do not have it for next year. And if you use a second one, you don't have it for the next year after that. So would it be worth it for the Minnesota Vikings to give up a draft pick? And then we have to decide where for Brendan Sorsby. So let's dive in because I've been researching this topic. I've been thinking about it a little bit more today. And a couple of comments from certain people have my attention, but it just begins with, I want to get to the end of this and then decide how I feel about it. Because for the most part, when people have asked, I've just sort of off the top of my head, like, I don't know, like it feels kind of risky going for somebody like this. They've already got so much going on with two quarterbacks competing, for one spot in Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy. Plus, if you don't have it work out, maybe you go to next year's draft and you don't have to pick somebody that is being suspended for a gambling issue, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's usually been my quick answer and then move on to the depth wide receiver spot or whatever we're talking about. But if I try to sort of put the devil's advocate hat on and make the case for Brendan Sorsby, it really just begins with the fact that the Minnesota Vikings don't know who their quarterback is for the future. And this was also noted by Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL general manager. This is a tweet from Kevin Seifert referring to a video of Mike Tannenbaum. Says, Tannenbaum mentions the Vikings as a team that should bid on quarterback Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft. To me, the question is whether the Vikings have the organizational bandwidth to take that on while conducting the Murray and McCarthy battle. So let's start with the argument for why the Vikings would consider this is pretty simple and straightforward, right? They have no idea who their quarterback is going to be in the year 2027. And you could say that any quarterback you bring in with any potential, even if you don't think it's the highest end potential, which we'll get into, that there's some disagreements about what people think of Brendan Sorsby as a project or as a prospect, but you don't have a franchise quarterback as of this moment. Now that could emerge as we go along in the year 2026. Either Kyler Murray could play the best football he's ever played, or JJ McCarthy could have it click and take the next step, and suddenly he wins the competition and you're trading away Kyler Murray and everything is different, right? Back to what we expected it to be in 2026. But as of right now, and the supplemental draft happens, I don't think they've released a date for it yet, but it usually happens like a week before training camp starts or 10 days before camp starts or something like that. So they've got about a month to do their research and figure out whether they want to be interested and then how much they're willing to bid in terms of their draft slot. There's also a ton of debate over that, where some people are reporting, well, it's going to take a second round pick, and others are saying, no way it's going to take a second round pick. So that may depend on what the Vikings are willing to put in for a bid for Sorsby as well. But there is a line of thinking that if you don't have a quarterback, you should try any and every possible avenue to get a quarterback. So if you are in the regular draft and not the supplemental draft, and you like a quarterback in the 5th round, just take him because you never know. Take a 4th round quarterback, maybe it's Dak Prescott. Take a 7th round quarterback, maybe it turns into Brock Purdy. Is it likely that that's going to happen? Not really, but you might as well, because you never know about the quarterback position, and plenty of quarterbacks over the years have been middle round picks or guys that nobody expected or guys that turned around their career at some point. It is such a unpredictable position, and the Vikings are in a spot right now where they cannot predict who is going to be their quarterback in 2027. So there is a case for anybody with any kind of potential. You should try to get into your franchise and see what happens. Now, what Seifert said there is the question is whether they have the organizational bandwidth. So this was something that we talked about in 2024. Take it back to when the Vikings signed Daniel Jones. I remember being on here talking with you guys when they signed Daniel Jones, and I remember what my take was. It was, at this moment, they have a really good starting quarterback. They've got a great quarterback room. Why are you bringing in some former starter to work with, to spend your time on in Daniel Jones, when you already have a good quarterback room? You're all set. And I guess it might be, a backup option, but he doesn't know the offense and he's showing up in the middle of the season. I would rather the coaches put all of their effort into Sam Darnold, right? That's what that was my take then, is why are we bothering with this, wash up quarterback from somebody else? And what's the point? Now, of course, as you know, Daniel Jones went on to sign with Indianapolis, have a pretty good season. But I can say for sure that Daniel Jones did not turn out to be any kind of distraction for the Vikings in 2024. He, more than anything, probably helped their quarterback room and helped Sam Darnold a bit, which would not be the case with Brendan Sorsby, that he wouldn't be helping JJ McCarthy or helping Kyler Murray. But it was, in my mind, something that wasn't really worth the time. And it ended up being totally fine. That if there's anybody in the NFL who could do something like this, who has enough coaches on staff, enough bandwidth, enough effort to put into and pour into a quarterback, it probably is Kevin O'Connell. That his, teaching quarterbacks is the top thing on this guy's, priority list at all times. And he loves it and he wants to put in the extra work with them. And Josh McCown is always working with every quarterback after. And right now you have 4 quarterbacks, and Max Brosmer is one of them, who you're also pouring into to some extent. You have a veteran in the room who's been through it all in Carson Wentz, with a starter in Kyler Murray, who is not really someone who's going to be working with younger guys, and an inexperienced quarterback in JJ McCarthy. But bringing in Brendan Sorsby based on his issues with something off the field doesn't really guarantee that. And keep in mind that I am sort of doing a let me try to talk myself into it thing here. I'm not sure if I'm convinced that this is a good idea, but we're talking ourselves into why it would make sense. That if Sorsby had some sort of problem within the locker room at Cincinnati, if he had some sort of issue with teammates, or he was uncoachable, or he, got in fist fights with the wide receivers or something, that would be a little bit different than an ailment of a gambling addiction. There's another way to look at that too, that there have been players who have come out into the NFL that had drug addiction problems. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu is one of them that was kicked out of LSU and ended up having a long career. There are certainly people who have had issues in their early life and have had, problems like this regarding drugs more often than it is something like gambling, that have gotten themselves back on the straight and narrow and had very good professional sports careers. And if we looked at it through that lens as an addiction, as an ailment, as something that he is having treated, you could look at it in a different way. Now, it's a very dicey situation because you are talking about someone who bet on their own team. I suppose it matters that he bet on them to win. I don't know. It probably doesn't. Although I guess if you bet against your team, then you could have some, level of influence or whatever in the outcome. But the point just being that if we're talking about something that they feel like will not be a long-term issue if he receives the right type of treatment or whatever it might be, then you could convince yourself that this is getting more of a steal than anything from someone who's coming out in the supplemental draft. And historically, that has happened with the supplemental draft. Like, there have been players who had something go wrong in college. Like, Terrell Pryor did not turn out to be a great NFL player, but wasn't he going to get suspended for getting illegal tattoos or something? Now, I know that's different than this, but the idea that something that happened to someone in college could make you available to the NFL at a lesser price than you normally would be, and the risk would be reduced. If you were going to spend a first-round draft pick on Brendan Sorsby after having this gambling problem, that would be extremely wildly risky. But if you're talking about putting in a 4th round or a 3rd round pick, and the Vikings got an extra 3rd from the Jonathan Grenard trade for someone that might have a higher end potential because of their skill set, you are not risking a whole heck of a lot. If the guy ends up doing something that gets him suspended from the NFL, you can wash your hands of it very quickly. And while he will have embarrassed your franchise, the world continues spinning, right? I mean, even the Vikings have a player on their team, to just show you how quick these things sort of come and go. They have a player on their team currently who served a 1-year suspension relating to gambling. And that was Isaiah Rodgers. And they got him for a reduced price after he came back into the league and played well with Philadelphia, and it ended up working out. I'm not making the argument that you should go out and sign every player who has a gambling addiction, but this is a very rare and unique case to get someone with a lot of talent. And I think that the way that Mike Tannenbaum, former NFL general manager, is viewing the situation is when you don't have a quarterback, then you have to be willing to kind of roll the dice. So how many teams are going to be interested? I was fascinated to find this out. His agent, keep in mind, it's his agent who seems to be crafting the narrative pretty darn well outside of, to the media. But just so take that for what it's worth. But this comes via Pro Football Talk, is that Ron Slavin, the agent for Brendan Sorsby, says 26 NFL teams have reached out to Sorsby when he decided to apply for the supplemental draft. So every team, as they should be almost in the entire NFL, only 8 teams according to him. Now, he could be lying and just making up that number, but if that's true, then the odds are the Minnesota Vikings have checked in with Brendan Sorsby, and it would make sense for any NFL team to try to do their research to understand where he is, what exactly happened, how good he is, and then start to try to figure out exactly where he's going to be drafted in the supplemental draft, because we are not talking about the next Bernie Kosar, who once the Vikings wanted to get in the supplemental draft, and he ended up choosing the Cleveland Browns instead. But we're not talking about someone who is sort of a lock top prospect type of guy. It was much more debated, and I think we need to look at that as well. So there's a lot of different opinions out there on Sorsby. We've heard a lot of he was a lock first round draft pick and so forth. And I found this exchange to be interesting between Chase Daniel and Dane Brugler. So Chase Daniel said that Brendan Sorsby was unquestionably a first round talent, but will teams take a chance on him? And Dane Brugler of The Athletic, top draft analyst, said if he were a slam dunk first round talent, he would have declared for the 2026 draft. Fair enough. So how good is he statistically? Well, my friend Tej Seth, who's a great analytics writer and talker, tweeted out a bunch of statistics for how good he was last year. And he finished 7th out of 150 quarterbacks in PFF grade. It's noticeable that his accuracy was only 98th out of 150, but turnover-worthy plays were very low. Pressure to sack ratio was extremely low. Expected points added per dropback was very high. So Sorsby, at very least, you can debate whether he would have been a first-round prospect or not. But from a statistical perspective, had a very, very good 2025 season. He had over a 90 PFF grade. And this is something we talk about all the time of production in college versus production in the NFL. He's played a decent amount of football. It's not somebody who's thrown 2,000 passes in college so far, but at least has a very good season last year under his belt. So this is a scouting report from Lance Zierlein of NFL.com on Brendan Sorsby here. He says that he gave him a 6.24 grade, which is an average NFL starter. And here's what he wrote about Sorsby. He said, Sorsby is driven by a competitive nature and admirable level of energy on the field. His combination of size and athleticism is in line with what teams covet in today's game. A gunslinger's mentality allows for an impressive deep throws to beat single coverage downfield, but also leads to poor decision-making against high safety looks. Sorsby doesn't have an elite arm strength, but can throw with enough velocity and brings an impressive arm talent to the field. He possesses NFL QB1 talent, but climbing that hill and staying there will require him to become more consistent in getting through progressions and altering his game plan once the coverage look changes post-snap. So what Sorsby sounds like here is a project type of quarterback with the potential to be a starter. Now, you could ask yourself maybe how often project quarterbacks, even in the first round, ever become starters. And the guy that I would look at for that would be Jordan Love, someone who got the actual time to develop. There aren't that many more, though. Like, normally, players either come in and within the first or second year are pretty good, and teams sort of move on. But the situation here with Sorsby and the way that he's coming into the league, it really lends itself for a red shirt type of season. The season that we have talked about so much that J.J. McCarthy could have used as a project quarterback. This is what Sorsby is likely going to get. And that may depend on whether the NFL can/will suspend him. There was an issue with Kayshon Boutte where they did not suspend Boutte in the NFL, but there's also the Terrell Pryor precedent where he was suspended for things that happened in college. So we don't know that. But wherever Sorsby goes, he's not going to be a starting quarterback right away, because what everyone was looking forward to with him going to Texas Tech was, is he going to take a next step in his game and dominate college football and then become a lock-dead first-round quarterback? That's why he stayed in. That's what Dane Brugler was kind of alluding to, is that he had to prove that he was worth taking as a first-round draft pick. So circling back to the Vikings, would they like to have in their building, let's just say a QB4, somebody who's not going to play, but is going to be developing behind the scenes with a chance to potentially be their quarterback at some point? Now, it would be a reach to say that he could be their quarterback in 2027, but maybe you use 2 seasons to develop him, see where you're at with Murray, see where you're at with McCarthy. I could see the argument for that. And if your QB4 ends up having some sort of issue with gambling again and you boot him, you've lost the draft pick and that's not good, but is that like the end of the world? Was it worth a risk to potentially get a starter? That I don't know. Now, when we get into the risk, I'm not downplaying this. I am only trying to present the, why would you do this argument? One more thing. This is from Bruce Feldman. He said, quoted someone in the NFL who said, I don't think he goes in the second round. Absolutely not. That's too big of a gamble. No pun intended. If the third round goes by, then the fourth round goes by. Why wouldn't someone take him and think they can fix him? These coaches all think that they can fix him. That was from Bruce Feldman. And there are other people who are reporting that a second round pick is likely. But I mean, if we're talking a third would be the highest that someone might go, that still feels like a little bit high. But if we're talking about a fifth, then that's different, right? A 5th round draft pick for someone who's had an issue while they're in college that I'm sure a lot of young people have had, that has the potential maybe someday to be a starting NFL quarterback. It would be hard to deny that a 5th round draft pick, a day 3, where the Vikings, no disrespect to Max Bredesen, are using that pick on a fullback to have someone with some potential as a starting quarterback down the road. And even if he was a 5th rounder who turned into a backup quarterback, there might be a good case for it. Now, when it comes to the argument against Sorsby, it's pretty simple. I mean, number one is you could waste a draft pick, and you don't ever want to waste a draft pick, because if you get the guy in your building and immediately, something happens and he gets suspended by the NFL, you're going to look around and go, well, because it's going to be like a one and done, right? I mean, for someone who's had this happen in college, if you have it happen in the NFL, you're going to be suspended for a year, if not worse than that, depending on what you gambled on. And then no team is ever going to take a chance on you again. So, at that point, you would be out of a draft pick and you'd feel pretty bad about losing whatever it is, even if it's a day 3, even if it's a 4th round draft pick. Who knows? Like, that could be a role player for you. And if you've just set it on fire with someone who couldn't stop gambling on the hot dog contest, which apparently was involved in this issue for Sorsby, well, then, that's not going to feel great. There's a different scenario that is much worse. Here's the much worse scenario. You get Sorsby in your building, and behind the scenes in practice, the coaches are really, really impressed. He's playing great. And all of a sudden, someone gets hurt. Let's say this scenario. It turns out that, Kyler Murray wins the quarterback competition. The Vikings trade away J.J. McCarthy. I don't think this will happen, but just go down this road with me. So they trade away J.J. McCarthy. Murray wins the quarterback competition. Murray goes 9-8 and has a pretty average season. And the coaches are loving what they've seen from Sorsby. So, all right. Brendan Sorsby, he's going to be our guy next year. We're going into the season with him as QB1. You get a veteran backup like, I don't know, Tyrod Taylor or something, or Joe Flacco, and you're like, Sorsby's our guy. And then he starts his career and he's good. And he's 6-3, he's 7-4, he's winning games, he's throwing touchdowns, he's a really good athlete, he's got a good arm. And then all of a sudden, the shoe drops, right? That something has been going on with him behind the scenes. He's suspended again for a year. And now you are up a creek without a quarterback that you poured so much into, and then you end up losing him. That would be the concern with Sorsby. So where I stand on it is I do not think the Minnesota Vikings will take a chance on Brendan Sorsby. I don't think that they'll put it. And if they put in a pick, it will be something that is a 6th rounder. Is basically, if the whole league says we don't want him, then, something like that. I think that there are a lot more desperate teams than the Vikings. They have been able to, here you get Sam Darnold, you get Kyler Murray. Each year in the NFL, it seems like there's quarterbacks coming available and they want to play for the Minnesota Vikings. Even Aaron Rodgers was available last year and was calling up Kevin O'Connell saying, can I please play for you? That might be Baker Mayfield next year, possibly. He does not have a contract right now. Could be all sorts of different quarterbacks. If something goes wrong where they are and their team decides, just like Kyler Murray, where we didn't see this coming a year ago, people thought that Murray was playing really well in Arizona and was going to take the next step there with that team. So we never know who's going to come available. And also, and this kind of leads us to FanDuel question of the day, and I understand the irony of that. I really do. But the FanDuel question of the day here is, would you prefer that the Vikings wait and see on the young quarterback class, which right now Arch Manning is the favorite to be picked number 1 at plus 185 on FanDuel, but also Dante Moore at plus 420, CJ Carr at plus 600, Julian Sayin at plus 1400, and Lenora Sellers at plus 2000. All these quarterbacks are being highly touted going into the season. So would you rather take a swing at Sorsby with a day 3 draft pick, or would you prefer that the Vikings just wait and see how next year's draft class works out with guys who don't have a similar issue? One more thing I wanted to mention, then we'll get your feedback and what you guys think about this, because answer the question. So I've presented both sides of the argument. Here's to do it. Here's not to do it. Give me a price tag if you would do it. Let me know in the comments. We'll get into your questions and thoughts as well. And everything is on the table tonight. Very wide open. We're talking about the supplemental draft. That means that anything Vikings that's on your mind, get in there and we'll have a good conversation as well. But I also wanted to mention that the Vikings made some more moves with their front office, and they are hiring former Bears general manager Ryan Pace as a football advisor and Azam Kapadia, a former Seahawks executive, as assistant director of pro scouting. So Nolan Teasley continues to add to his front office. And I know I said this last time with the additions to the front office, and I'll say it again. I really like that a lot of the people now in the more powerful positions, the assistant general managers, but even below that, are Nolan Teasley's guys that are going to be running things. And it was the case that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah had assistant general managers that were his choices, Ryan Grigson and Demetrius Washington. But this is going deeper than that for Nolan Teasley into, bringing in somebody to be assistant director of pro scouting, bringing in, a former general manager to work at his side. And I imagine that there could be, some more changes in some way or another for the Vikings front office as we go forward. So the fact that Teasley is really making this his right away is exactly how you would have drawn it up. Like, that doesn't mean fire everybody. It doesn't mean get rid of every single person who's been here. But this is a team that has basically not drafted well since 2015. It's been a very long time, and keeping everybody involved when those have been the results would not make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. So Teasley, coming from a team that's crushed the draft, crushed their pro scouting, has done extremely, extremely well at building a Super Bowl caliber team, bringing in some of their talent, other people around the league that he respects. I like it. I want as much power for Nolan Teasley coming in to shape this roster and his vision as he can possibly get. So, all right, let's get to your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings on Sorsby and whatever else is on your mind and whatever else it might be. Let's see. Oh, let me scroll back up to the top and we could start from there. So Ron says, not with a gambling addiction. Right. I mean, it is a scary thing. Absolutely. When you're talking about something that is pretty much an immediate 1-year suspension in the NFL. And if it's worse than that, because with Isaiah Rodgers, there was an issue where someone else was using his account to place bets, which, may have been, it's hard to say, right? Was he involved in asking them to put bets on certain things, or what exactly was going on there? But still, like, that wasn't even as egregious as what was happening with Sorsby betting on his own team. But I also think too that, when you listen to Isaiah Rodgers talk about this, I can't say when it comes to gambling addiction, like how solvable it is. That would be like inappropriate and unfair to people who have addictions. I think any person who suffers from addiction, to me, it is an ailment that would tell you like, hey, like, this is not something that can be easily controlled, right? But is it something that you can treat, learn from, stay away from? Or do teams feel like this is a loose, cannon kind of situation, and we don't know at any moment? I mean, if he was betting on balls and strikes at Cincinnati Reds games, like, is this going to carry over to the NFL? You have to ask yourself that question. And that's where teams are going to be doing a lot of background and research and trying to figure out, is this somebody who is going to get this under control and take the proper steps to be able to do it? Or is the competitive environment of the NFL just set up for someone to really struggle with this particular addiction? We don't know. Arlen says, I think I'd pass. Mad Rad says no. Next topic. Tristan says no. McCarthy is plenty good enough. That has definitely not been shown on the actual field. Apparently, let's see. Contra Paston says that the Lions have gotten Lucky Jackson. There you go. I didn't know that. I didn't know Lucky was back. That's nice. Arlen says, think he would bring too much controversy with the gambling issues. I don't think that's really KOC's style. I suppose him and Brosmer could have their own separate competition. Well, that's the thing. Is it really that controversial? Like, for a day it would be. This is, and again, I don't think that they should necessarily do this, but there's also a part of me that thinks, is it being overstated what kind of controversy it would be? First day that they make the pick, it would be a huge deal because nothing is going on that time of year in July. And then the first day that Sorsby arrives in Minnesota, think about how fast the news cycle works in the NFL, that anything that happens is gone in like a couple days. The idea that a controversy could rest over a team for a long period of time in 2026 just is a little preposterous. I mean, because whatever happened today will be gone by tomorrow. So the minute they start camps, there's going to be huge news all over the NFL about every training camp, and no one's going to care at all about Brendan Sorsby. Like, that's not even going to be a discussion. He would come to TCO Performance Center. We would ask him a bunch of questions. We would do a press conference, and that would probably be the last time that we even talked to him, unless it was someone on the side. That would probably be the last time that he even spoke for an entire year, would be my guess, unless something crazy happened and he ended up playing in actual games. But if he's going to be treated as a red shirt type of project player who's behind the scenes, like, I don't know, that doesn't seem that controversial. There usually, when a controversy has legs, is when it starts to have like another thing and another thing. So there's a problem, but then there's more problems. Think about Antonio Brown. But even if think about Antonio Brown, he walked out of the stadium, took his jersey off, whatever else. And then by the next week we were talking about something else. So I don't think that would be the reason not to. The reason not to would be that you're too worried that this is just going to blow up in your face, and you just don't think that he's worth giving up the draft pick because you don't see any path to him becoming the starter, or you think that even if he did, you would still be, unable to sleep every night wondering if this thing is going to come back and bite you. So one of the five says a 5th round pick. I'd say do it. Trade JJ and get the pick back. I mean, a 5th round draft pick, you can trade down in the 3rd round and get a 5th back or something, right? So that would be my thing. If the Vikings did this and they gave up a 5th, I think you'd be like, okay, I mean, like, this will be interesting to talk to the guy and see if it ever goes anywhere. But it's not like anyone can sit here and say, and yeah, I know Stephon Diggs was a 5th round pick at one point, so you never know. But it's not like you could say, wow, Nolan Teasley really messed up the franchise from day one here with, essentially trading a 5th round pick, like using a 5th round pick in the supplemental draft. The fact that they have top 100 picks next year is more important than that. And if they were to trade Kyler Murray or JJ McCarthy, whoever loses the quarterback competition, then yeah, they would get draft capital back. I do think that you're right with 5th round being the place where it feels like it's just totally safe to do, where you don't feel like you're giving up a whole heck of a lot. The other question would be, Lone Wolf says Vikings have a deep enough quarterback room. They don't need to bring in Sorsby. Do they really, though? I mean, they have Carson Wentz, who's not any sort of starting future option. JJ McCarthy's first 10 games are not indicative of someone who becomes a franchise quarterback. And Kyler Murray has been a below average or below 500. He's been above average, but below 500 quarterback in his career. And if he's an average quarterback, then you have nothing. And Max Brosmer is a guy who's going to be on a team for 10 years because he's a great dude and can learn the offense and can contribute a lot, but he's not a future starting option for the Minnesota Vikings. So yeah, I mean, you could say they have a deep quarterback room right now, but in 2027, not under contract, no clear idea of what the guy's going to be, not under contract, and UDFA, who's not going to be their starter. So they really don't have a future deep quarterback room when it comes to that. But, with Sorsby, there is the question of like who else would be willing, because when we're talking about the 5th, round draft pick as being the best possible place to go with this, then like who else is going to be interested? Like what other teams? And there are probably 10 teams that if you don't do it, you're just insane. I mean, why would the Miami Dolphins not do this? For, I don't know, a 4th round draft pick for the Miami Dolphins? If it's the Cleveland Browns, there was a report that the Browns like weren't that interested or something. It's like, if you're the Cleveland Browns, your starter is a much worse situation off the field than this. And you were willing to give up draft capital, hundreds of millions of dollars to Deshaun Watson. Why wouldn't you spend a 3rd round draft pick on Brendan Sorsby? The Arizona Cardinals, another good example. They just spent a 3rd round draft pick on Carson Beck, who is not a very good prospect. And they have Jacoby Brissett, who wants more money, Gardner Minshew. Like, they have no answers at all. Why wouldn't you do that? Or any team that has an older veteran starting quarterback that they're unclear on would make more sense than the Minnesota Vikings. But you can look a year down the road and see why this would at least make some sense for the Vikings to roll every dice and take every shot, because you never know who your quarterback is going to be. And I was just listening to an interview with Kyle Shanahan, and Shanahan was talking about Brock Purdy and how like day after day in practice, Purdy just kept improving and improving and improving. And the coaches would go in after practice and watch the film and just be like, are we really seeing what we think we're seeing? Like, are we really seeing this 7th round draft pick become our starting quarterback? So it speaks to how little we actually know about the quarterback position. I mean, there's so many that I could go back 2 years and look at what happened at the quarterback position and be like, remember this? Remember when we thought that? So much changes so fast. So I think that would be the main reason to think about it. Joker says it would pick him if he's good, but he's not, right? Well, I don't know, because that seems to be debated by a lot of people, where the numbers are pretty darn good with his production from Cincinnati. I did watch a game or two from him that was a bigger game for them, and they were overpowered as a team, and he didn't play very well. And I've seen some people pointing out that, like, yeah, he crushed these teams and didn't perform as well against better teams. We really would have needed this year at Texas Tech to have a true feel for how good Sorsby was going to be coming out in the draft. That's why it's more of a leap of faith that you would be doing it with a later round draft pick potentially than you would spend a high draft pick on him. But I don't know if he's good or not. I mean, at least from a numbers perspective, he played very well last year overall. He graded well, touchdown to interception ratio, sack ratio, turnover worthy play ratio were all good. He's got good athleticism, a strong enough arm. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, is it a worthwhile prospect to take a swing at? Like, if he was there, if he was in the normal draft and somebody with this production and skill set was in the 3rd round, you'd probably be like, dude, you should take him. I think that we ran into this with Malik Willis, right? A couple years ago, where it was like, why don't you just take Malik Willis in the 3rd round and see if there's anything there? And I don't know, maybe they would have bailed on him and he would have ended up in Green Bay anyway, but like, at least there was something there with Malik Willis. Mad Red, 61% completion percentage. Like, I just don't know, like, how much completion percentage. That seems like a fine completion percentage for college. Like, the receivers aren't that great. But the other numbers I think were more telling. The accuracy percentage not being great would be a big concern, though, for sure. The production being better than the accuracy percentage is interesting. But at the same time, like, usually the negative plays tell us a lot about a quarterback. Like, this was the Bo Nix thing, where Bo Nix had, I think, 6 sacks and 3 interceptions or something in his senior year. Like, that matters a lot to projecting your future. J.G. Berserker says he's worth a 5th round bid, wouldn't go much higher. Already have a QB room filled with projects. Well, really one project. It's just J.J. McCarthy is really the only. I don't think that it's filled with projects. I mean, Max Brosmer is, maybe someday Brosmer will be good enough to be a backup quarterback. Right now, he is got a little bit of experience under his belt and can walk out onto a field and take a snap, but that's really it. So I don't look at Brosmer as any sort of project for the future. It's really just JJ McCarthy. And in your first year, yeah, like that would be the question of, if you're working with McCarthy so much, do you have time to work with someone like Sorsby? Or is he going to be like, I don't know, like going through this whole thing, is he going to be like deeply unhappy and be miserable? And I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about how he would respond to being in a situation where he clearly wasn't going to play right away, but I don't think any team could play him right away, except for maybe Cleveland or Arizona would be the only teams that would make any sort of sense. You could make a case for the New York Jets as well. These like perpetually brutal teams at the quarterback position, but that's kind of it. Bob, we have a good quarterback room right now. Maybe so, but do you have a good quarterback room for 2027? Because that's really when you would be doing this for, is to have somebody who would be making a case to either be your starter or backup. And we know this. I mean, the backup quarterback thing comes up all the time. If you have a reasonable backup quarterback, that's worth something. Teams are paying $10 million, a year for backup quarterbacks. So even having a rookie contract backup is helpful to you. BM, very funny. We have a Sorsby at home. That's funny. Arlen says, if the Vikings do pick him, I will defend his honor in this comment section. Yes. Matt in Wisconsin. I totally respect the irony of Sorsby's draft position in an ironic FanDuel question of the day. Yeah, I mean, that is the world that we live in. But to your point, Arlen, That's the thing about like this Sorsby thing is, as we talk it through, I think most people's first reaction would be, okay, no, stop. Right. They're not going to do this. So whatever. But if they did, I think that 90% of Vikings fans would be like, whatever, man. We don't have a quarterback, so take any shot you possibly can. And I mean, I don't mean to downplay what Sorsby did, because if it becomes an issue down the road and he's your starting quarterback, you could just lose him and he could disappear forever. And that would be really disruptive to your franchise. But we are not talking about someone who, like, in terms of crimes, is on, and I don't mean to downplay it. Like, this is a serious issue, and it's a serious issue for young men a lot too, right? Like, you know, if you have a problem, like, you should make sure you see somebody and everything like that. Like, I want to make sure that I'm telling you, like, this is serious, but it's also not like something that you would go, well, this is criminal behavior. This is somebody who is going to come into your community and be dangerous or whatever like that. I mean, the guy was betting balls and strikes at a Cincinnati Reds game. Like, we have to keep in context that we can kind of villainize sometimes. It's sort of how I felt about Tyrann Mathieu, of like, okay, like, he clearly had an issue with drugs, but like, he doesn't seem like an axe murderer here, right? You know, so we got to keep that in mind a little bit. Bruno says, imagine bringing another quarterback in the locker room where Kyler Murray is complaining about not having enough reps. That's funny, but he wasn't complaining. He was answering a question directly. But I think it's cute that a lot of people tried to spin a narrative that wasn't true. That's always fun for the internet, but that's total BS. I mean, I'm not shocked by anything that happens on the internet, but that one was actually comical. Like, the question was, what's the hardest part been? And he said, not taking all the reps. And then people made that into whatever they wanted to make it into. I guess Kyler should have just said, nothing is the hardest part. Let me give you no answer at all. I think his answer was extremely reasonable and not at all said in any sort of way. It was a matter of fact kind of way of, I've always been the starter, so this is different. And then he said, but I knew I was going to be uncomfortable coming here and I can grow from that. So yeah, wow, the horror, stop. I mean, we get enough drama and controversy from the NFL. We don't have to invent it. I promise you. Let's see. Bob says, I bet they skipped this one. Yeah, more likely than not. They probably will. They will probably look at it like, you know, we don't really need to involve ourselves in this situation. But at the same time, you know, when Kevin O'Connell likes a quarterback, he's going to find a way to get that quarterback in here, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like with Daniel Jones, it was bizarre almost that Daniel Jones was a Minnesota Viking for a little while, never took a snap, but he was here. Joker says, hard for me to even be mildly upset at someone betting on their own team to win. I know you can't do it and it's selfish, but it doesn't compromise competitive integrity. Yeah, it is. So it is different. There is a big difference between what happened like in the NBA, where guys were giving information to gamblers about like what was happening in practice and who had injuries and who wasn't going to play. And then also there were other instances where, you know, guys were intentionally maybe missing shots or faking injuries and taking themselves out of games to hit the unders. There was the pitcher who was intentionally throwing balls on purpose so his friends could bet on him to throw a ball as the first pitch. And you're like, okay, that is outrageous right there when you are truly harming your team and franchise. And I think in this instance, Sorsby wasn't even playing when he was doing it. So it is different. Like every single instance, there are differences. But yeah, you can't have that. You cannot have that. And in the NFL, that will be, you're out of the league. You're just done if you're doing something like that. And there are plenty of ways, as we see from Sorsby's situation now, for even situations like this to be identified and people to get caught. And it's very hard to get away with it. So, but it is different. I agree with you. It is different of, you know, betting on your team to win versus doing something, especially when you're not playing, versus doing something to intentionally lose a game for your team. That would be, no one would ever even think about drafting you if you did something like that. Bob says, just looked at it. Cleveland gave up 2 1s for Kozar. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting situation there where Kozar was basically picking where he wanted to go, and the Vikings wanted him really bad. And once again, you were sort of brushing up against having a franchise quarterback, and just did not end up working out. Gobbling says, feels like he would be great on Dallas behind Dak. Well, there's a lot of teams that would make sense for him as a developing backup with an older veteran type of quarterback. And that's why this thing is so interesting to me. Like, I know some fans have sort of dismissed it, and I get that, but it's also June 17th. And, you know, we can kind of talk about something that's going on around the NFL, but there are a lot of teams that there would be an argument for. They may have an expensive quarterback or they don't have a good backup. Even a team like Jacksonville, like, yeah, they've got Trevor Lawrence. He's pretty well settled as their starter, but Nick Mullins is their backup. And, you know, we don't know about Trevor Lawrence. He's very expensive. And as we've seen from Kyler, if you're very expensive, it almost makes you a little bit year to year with teams, because they could just decide you're not worth the money anymore, like with Kyler, and things could get a little ugly and they move on. So there are a lot of teams that this makes sense for, and it will be fascinating to see how many end up actually putting in a bid for Brendan Sorsby. It might come down to what the intel is. Like, if the intel is, hey, this is a really great guy who made a very big mistake at a young age, which, you know, does happen in America, then you might get a lot of teams saying, yeah, I could see it. But if they feel like this is someone who is entitled, who doesn't, you know, see what they did wrong, who might have an issue that goes way beyond, because NFL teams always have more intel than the outside does, that's what I think it will probably come down to. And it will come down to the evaluations. Like, do they see it? Do they see a Jordan Love, or do they see like a Kenny Pickett or something where, yeah, all right, I mean, maybe he could play in the NFL, but if he's not going to have any starting potential, then we're not going to take the risk. Joker says betting against your own team should be an automatic permaban. Oh, yeah, no, for sure. BM, we already have Brosmer at QB4. He doesn't cost a draft pick. Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like, when we're talking about Sorsby, is we're not talking about someone who is a undrafted free agent with very limited physical skills like Brosmer. And I have the utmost respect for the way that Max Brosmer has handled himself in the NFL. There's a reason he's still here. And I think that someday, they played him against Seattle, guys. I mean, good Lord. Like, that team destroyed Drake May. So not exactly the easiest place to start your NFL career. And he did have, you know, a couple moments in there against the Giants with a nice throw that set them up to win that game and so forth. So, I mean, I think with someone like Brosmer, yeah, someday you could see him becoming an NFL quarterback. But the reason you would do this for Sorsby is that you would think someday he could become your starting quarterback. Hunter says, if we're talking a fifth, I'm in. Joker, as the fullback expert, do you think Max Bredesen will fix JJ McCarthy's negative aura? You know, Joker, that's not what I meant by any other questions, different things that are on your mind. Although, you know, hey, like, feel free to toss in other things, like what's on your mind, what else are you thinking about? Like, this was the main subject for me tonight, and I was really fascinated to see where you guys are at with this. But it does kind of ask you to go a step further, which is, well, what are you in 2027? I mean, that's the biggest question that's going to get answered for this year in general. Also, I wrote a couple of things that I want to talk about, just doing some research too. But fixing, I actually don't think that, you know, JJ McCarthy has a negative aura. I mean, during practice, he looked fine, looked like himself, high-fiving teammates, you know, like having a good time at practice. I think that if you're JJ McCarthy, you're probably not very happy to answer questions about someone else trying to take your job. And he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and we saw that from JJ McCarthy. But Bredesen's aura is insane. Like, just the fullback. He looks exactly like a fullback. He's big, kind of hulking. Like, the way he moves around, you're like, yep, that's it. It did. You know, when I talk about sometimes being a journalist to being objective, it's almost impossible to be objective about a fullback that looks like that. Steven, can he be picked as an undrafted free agent if no team bets on him? Again, with the bets, if no team submits a draft pick for his services, is what you mean, Steven. Yeah, that's what happens. Yep. Is if no one takes you in the supplemental draft, then you're just a free agent. So, I mean, this is your way out of college because it looked like it was going to turn into a total bleep show. That, it's a temporary injunction, but that doesn't mean it's forever. And the NCAA could find ways around, or other teams were already saying that they were not going to play against them or take them off their schedule or forfeit games or whatever it was that other, teams were saying. So clearly it was already causing a huge controversy, even just to have the temporary injunction. I think that probably Sorsby, one, got some information from the NFL that some teams might be interested in him. Maybe got, some sort of commitment from somebody who knows, right? That, hey, if you're going to go into the supplemental draft, we will draft you, because it was quite the turn. Like, he goes from being in court trying to play in college to all of a sudden, you know what, forget all that. Now I'm going to the supplemental draft. And it makes you wonder, did he hear something from the NFL, like from a team or multiple teams that were interested? And the fact that his agent is at least saying that a lot of the league is at least checked in is kind of interesting. But yeah, if he doesn't get drafted, then undrafted free agency it is. Bob says it's Baker next year. That would be something that we could definitely have a conversation about. Like, what would you put the odds on right now for 2027 Vikings quarterback? And yes, I, again, understand the irony of that phrasing. Lonesome loser. Oh, come on. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to yourself as a name. Young college players get paid cash and gambling is pushed all over the place. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, I mean, no question about that. Like, this is a situation that has to be, I think, learned from in college in general with college athletes. And not all of you are going to be a quarterback that has interest from the NFL. That, yeah, maybe if it happens and you go into the supplemental draft, if you're a great player, but if you're not, you might just end your college playing career by making that mistake. So it's something to be learned from. But look, everyone has to do this will make their own choice about it, and then, be responsible if that's something that you're going to do. And that goes for everything. I mean, that goes for how much you drink in college, whether you drink and drive, whether you race. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like Jalen Carter and street racing, which has killed people, versus, a gambling addiction. I mean, we start to have this, it's a little bit dark and it feels a little bit twisted, but that didn't hurt Jalen Carter too much. And the Eagles were willing to step up and be like, sure, we'll take him. BM, potential young quarterback, smokes 3 packs a day. Joe Camel, question of the day. Yes, you guys, it's totally fine. Yes, for you guys to make fun of me for that. But, that is the world we live in. So Arlen says would throw a fourth at him. Arlen, you've changed your tune just in the middle of the conversation, which I don't blame you for, because when you start talking through it, it starts to make more sense if you're talking about giving up a day 3 draft pick. And I am not buying that someone's going to spend a second round draft pick. Second rounders are starters. On somebody that is a project quarterback, I don't know about that. BM, did I enjoy the roundtable with Seifert and Alec? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you didn't see it, we did a roundtable with Tatum Everett on Vikings Entertainment. I tweeted it out, and it's also on Vikings.com and their YouTube page. So make sure that you go check that out. That was a really enjoyable. And I got to say, man, I could use the studio that Vikings Entertainment has. I mean, it looks great. And Tatum Everett is awesome as a host. So I really enjoyed that. And I was appreciative of them having me on and spread the Purple Insider word. Bob, back in the day, players were smoking on the sidelines. Yes, there's the famous picture of Len Dawson, burning a heater on the sideline on like a metal chair. Yeah, man, you watch any old NFL films, football was a little bit different then. Joker says it's going to be a long time before we get a pick funnier than Ryan Pace drafting Mitchell Trubisky. Made my sides hurt laughing in the moment, but absurdly hilarious in hindsight. Yeah, and he has to wear that, and that's something, I've seen people say like, oh, they're bringing in all the failed general managers and so forth. And Ryan Pace actually did an interview where he explained what happened and why Mitch Trubisky was their pick and not Patrick Mahomes that year. And it was a really fascinating thing to listen to him go through the process and everything. I will say, like, we never know with quarterbacks. I say that over and over because it's just the truth that sometimes you think, why are they drafting this quarterback? And the guy turns out to be a star. And sometimes you pass on Patrick Mahomes. And there was a lot of thought, though. I remember going through that year. There was a lot of thought that Mahomes wasn't that great of a prospect and he was not drafted number 1. So no one actually knew that that was going to end up being the case. Although, that's a pretty big miss to make. But what is his role is going to be for the Vikings is football advisor, and he should advise them to take Mahomes. I had to. But this is somebody who's been in that chair before, and Nolan Teasley has not. So having somebody alongside of you who has been an experienced general manager and kind of been through it before, I don't think is the worst decision. But, trying to evaluate front office hires like their acquisitions in free agency, I've always had a tough time with it. Even with, Teasley was the pick for me for them to hire because he was an outside voice, but I don't know. I mean, I just met him for the first time 2 weeks ago. Like I'd never met him before. There's not stats on assistant general managers. I had heard good things about him throughout the process, but so who the heck knows, right? So the same probably goes for front office hires, like where just because someone didn't work out as a general manager somewhere else. And this has always been the thing about Grigson when people come in, why isn't Grigson fired and stuff like that? It's like, well, I mean, you don't really know on a day-to-day basis, like what he does. And Grigson was in the Seattle Seahawks front office in 2018 and 19. So, just because someone didn't work out, and the same thing goes for Kwesi, like the 49ers brought him back immediately. Just because they didn't work out in the big chair doesn't mean they have no business being here or they can't bring, a level of perspective. Joker says, I think Nolan Teasley would be a better GM than I would have been. That wouldn't necessarily be true for everyone they've hired. Well, look, a lot of this comes down to the quarterback position that we're talking about. And I think that they brought someone in with the right mentality to not overhaul necessarily, but to put a lot of people in the positions of power that he liked from Seattle, and also bring in some outside perspectives of his own for people that he clearly respects around the league. He hired a top analytics person, and I know the Browns have not won the Super Bowl. They have not been in the playoffs, but that doesn't mean they don't have a top analytics guy, and that's Andrew Healy was considered that. So putting together this front office that's just going to be different. It's going to look different, and we'll see if the results are different, but I tend to think that with Teasley, they will be more so than they were with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Dan says, still can't wrap my head around 9,000 bets placed. That's almost 30 a day for a year straight. Yeah, I know. I mean, okay, you guys are really in your bag with some of the jokes, wanting Vegas to take him. That's funny, Kerpluppy. But yeah, I know. I mean, clearly this was an addiction, and they really have to work their way through whether this is something that is going to carry with him or if it was something that he got caught up in and couldn't stop and can be treated. That's why this is such a unique case that I think has captivated so many people. Dan, I'd be fine with a low pick, 5th round, but probably not higher. BM, I cheered for Adrian Peterson. If we take Sorsby, I'll find a way to ignore his personal life. I mean, like betting on stuff, I think of it having more of a disease, an addiction, than it is stuff from the personal life that you would say is like what Adrian Peterson had and that whole issue and everything else. I think it's different. I think it's different. Hall says, wouldn't be shocked if the commissioner suspended him. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another subject to think about is, will he face a suspension immediately? Will it carry over? Will they kind of go with the Terrell Pryor type of thing where they say, this was our precedent, this is how we treated it, and he's going to be suspended for the year? And in that case, is it worth it? Like maybe it still is, and maybe he spends the entire year away from the team, knowing you're a part of the team, but you're developing, and they can give him sort of a development plan and then comes back in training camp next year. But it's not something that I expect really for him to be suspended right away by the NFL, but no one knows. And we haven't heard like from the commissioner or anybody else about what they're going to do. Eric says, do the Vikings need more quarterback drama? I'm fine with seeing how the room shakes out, which I think is totally okay. I mean, I think that's totally okay. If that's your take, I mean, for sure. But how much drama it will really create, I guess, is my question. Because this is not somebody that they're bringing into the room who is a bad person necessarily. Like, he might be, but I mean, I don't know that that's connected to the gambling issue, right? If they're bringing somebody into their room just to be a development quarterback for the year and then everything is up in the air in the future, I don't know how much drama that creates. This is not like, I don't know, Geno Smith got punched by IK and Impali and then eventually became a franchise starting quarterback in Seattle. So I don't know, but there's no evidence with him of being a bad teammate or somebody that, you know, the rest of the guys couldn't stand, or he was getting in fights with people, or he had issues with coaches or anything. It seems like the main and only thing that was keeping him away would be the gambling issue from being someone who would go into this year and have a case to make for a first round draft pick. That is all that I've seen anywhere. I mean, his competitive fire seems to be something that people praise about him, and the accuracy still has some work to do, which, you know, we could look at JJ McCarthy and wonder, well, can that really be fixed? But the numbers were pretty good. But, you know, in terms of like creating drama in the room, I haven't seen anything that said that this is going to create drama other than when it actually happens, it'll be a big news story. When he actually arrives at a place, it'll be a big news story. And then he's just on the team and it goes from there. Hunter says, was unaware of that happening in the NBA. That's crazy. I know Giannis is an investor. Yeah, the Kalashi thing. I don't know how that's even allowed, that a player could be an investor in that. And it was. I mean, there's a lot of allure when it comes to basketball, I think specifically, to where, I mean, when you're talking about unders for rebounds or something, like, you can control that as a player. You just, whoops, I didn't get there. And that one is, you know, why I think leagues are investing a lot in trying to police this as best as they possibly can, which is, you know, even why someone like Sorsby ends up kind of getting found out. Kerpluppy says, picture this. It's week 9. The Vikings 8-1, still haven't named a starting quarterback. McCarthy and Kyler Murray trade the starts with each other. The plan works. KOC wins coach of the year. You know, somebody did bring this up, a listener, about like back in the day, this used to happen a lot where teams wouldn't have their locked in starter. This would even go for like Tommy Kramer and Wade Wilson, where, you know, Tommy would play and then maybe he wasn't effective and then Wade Wilson would come in. It is fascinating. We don't see this anymore. I think that the reason we don't see this anymore is that there's a lot of good starting quarterbacks in the league who you would rather just keep playing instead of going back and forth. And the most famous example is the San Francisco 49ers in the late 80s, splitting starts between Joe Montana and Steve Young, which is just, you talk about drama. But, you know, I don't even know how dramatic this thing is going to be when we talk about like actual drama. How dramatic it's going to be with Kyler and JJ McCarthy. Like, they're going to go to training camp and they're going to run their reps and we're going to see what happens. I mean, yeah, it's going to have a lot of our attention, and that's not good. Okay. Did we reconnect? Sorry guys. I think I just froze there. Sorry if I froze. Yep. Okay. I think we're good. So, there are, you know, odds that we were talking about. FanDuel question of the day was, you know, there are multiple quarterbacks that are expected to be drafted high next year, with Arch Manning being at the top of that list at plus 160 to be the number 1 overall pick. So the FanDuel question of the day is, would you prefer that the Vikings throw something at Sorsby and see if they could get a young quarterback that might be interesting for the future, or just wait on a really good draft class? And why don't we just do this? Why don't we just do this for the comment section? Who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback in 2027? I mean, we might as well have that discussion, right? As we're talking about Brendan Sorsby, who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback in 2027? If you got a random name, if you think it's Baker Mayfield, if you think someone else will come available, if you think it's going to be JJ, if you think it's going to be Kyler, like, what has to happen in order for us to get there? Because if you're really totally unsure, then, you know, the idea of throwing a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick at somebody like this, it doesn't sound that bad. But are you confident? I would be very curious if you have some sort of confidence there. Mahal says the Jets and Cardinals make the most sense. They don't have quarterback of the future on the roster and could just play him this year to evaluate. Yeah, that is true. There are some teams where his path to the field this year is a lot easier. But when you talk about not having a quarterback of the future on the roster, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings have a good argument for that as well. Derek says, look at next year's quarterback picks. Is it worth taking a second rounder this year? He would be a fourth rounder next year. I'm not sure what you mean exactly by that. Like, you mean this next draft take like a second round quarterback? Or do you mean like that Sorsby might not have worked out and become a fourth rounder anyway, which there is some argument for. Like, he's put his name on the map a little bit at Cincinnati, but that doesn't mean that he was ever going to be a top starter. And we have done that a lot. I mean, Drew Aller is a great example where we declare somebody, oh yeah, they're going to be a first round pick next year, no question. And then it doesn't end up working out and they're not. So there is a little bit of risk when it comes to that. BM says, when the Vikings bring you in for a round table, do they feed you? If so, what kind of spread? Not today. They did not, or not that day that we recorded it. No, but they do feed us sometimes. And usually it's pretty good. So yeah, but it doesn't take very long. I mean, recording that took like 20 minutes. So we just sat down and talked football. If it was going to take like an hour, then yeah, food would have probably been good. Ryder says, Sorsby seems like everything else in the organization is moving forward in a positive direction. Thought of this seems like a move backwards. I mean, a move back. I don't see it as a move backwards. No, I mean, if you were talking about throwing a fourth round draft pick at somebody who may someday be something and may someday be nothing, that you get your hands on, maybe a prospect you like for a very, very low price because of this issue that he had in college, I just don't see that as a culture killer. I mean, I just feel like we're sort of conflating that with other athletes that maybe would be really like an ugly situation or something like that. I mean, when they drafted, Delvin Cook, that was kind of a big risk type situation. That it was an ugly situation before that, with him coming out in the draft, and it was kind of hard to talk about what had happened, and then eventually has the issue in 2021. This is not harming other people, and it wasn't being a bad teammate. It wasn't being uncoachable or anything like that. I don't think that it feels like a step backwards. It feels like kind of a roll of the dice that is going to get a lot of attention on day one and then probably not be talked about unless the guy becomes a starting quarterback. Sean says, I know it was under Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but we wasted a fifth on Jaren Hall. Why not throw a fifth round bid? And if it works out, great. Then if not, oh well. Yeah, right. I mean, and a lot of teams do that. I mean, Jaren Hall had some good numbers coming out of college. And the minute he stepped on an NFL field, it became pretty apparent. And he looked pretty good in practice. But the minute he stepped on an NFL field, it became apparent that the game was too big and too fast for him. And he wasn't going to be an NFL quarterback. But would you defend? I mean, I wasn't thrilled by it because, okay, a fifth round draft pick, quarterback, they don't work out that often. But could you defend that all day long? Of course you could. Because if you get it right and the guy becomes Brock Purdy, then, oh my gosh, you have this incredibly cheap quarterback or somebody who could be there that you build around for a long time. So the upside to these things is so high of rolling the dice that you might as well, even if your percentages are not particularly great. Kit says, I think you throw a sixth out there for Sorsby just in case. Doesn't prohibit you from making a quarterback next year, picking the next year in the first round. In fact, best case is that they look at him as a backup. Well, that's the other thing is that even if Sorsby, because we talk about, well, he's got this high end and so forth, but even if he just became a backup quarterback and was like Nick Mullins plus, then okay, like that's not a bad thing. Then you have somebody who could come in a pinch and play for you, and backup quarterbacks end up playing a lot of games. I think there's something like 70 quarterbacks a year get into a game. So having a backup, as we've seen from the Vikings, where they really haven't had one, or they brought in Carson Wentz at the last minute, the Sam Howell thing, did not work out. So it's not even that easy to get a good backup quarterback. If he turned out to be that and maybe ended up making a handful of starts and winning for you, it's easily worth the draft pick. I mean, I think that there's a stronger logical argument for throwing a day 3 pick, but I also think, just if we're playing this out how I think it's going to happen, is I don't know if the Vikings are going to spend anything on this or put in any bid for him. But if they are, they probably would make it a day 3 draft pick. And I think someone else is going to do a third. That's how I think it'll play out. I would be really surprised by a 2nd round draft pick. Someone would have to be super high on him for that. But a 3rd rounder, okay, like the percentage chance that works out is maybe 20% for 3rd round draft picks. And you might as well if you're a desperate team at the quarterback position, which the Vikings are for the future, but not necessarily for right now. So Ryder says, we can't even get our quarterback to not gritty into the end zone. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But I don't think that Sorsby is uncoachable. It really would depend on, I mean, when you're talking about this gambling issue, it's hard to reach into what we don't know about, like what the rehab process is actually like, if they feel like this is something that he got caught up in that he can move away from, or if they think it's going to be an issue for his entire life. Like, I don't know. I mean, addiction is a very, very complicated subject, and the number of bets, the things that were bet on, it certainly feels that way. Also, I mean, pro athletes are competitors, they're competition junkies, and can you manage that a little bit would really be the question. I mean, that's the question that every team is going to have to ask themselves when they make a decision on this. Kit says, keep them around in case the guys they have or next year they draft bust. Do you mean like keep them? You mean like put in a late round pick, keep them just in case? Dan says would be a bold first draft for the big T's. Is that what you're going with for Nolan Teasley? I don't think that's a great nickname. It would be bold. Yes, it would be a bold and aggressive thing to do if they were to give up a draft pick for him. But also, I mean, Nolan Teasley's coming from a place where they drafted a 3rd round quarterback who became a Super Bowl champion and franchise quarterback. And then they picked up somebody else's quarterback and had a lot of success. And then they picked up somebody else's quarterback and had a lot of success. So I don't know how he views this. I don't know if Teasley views this as strongly as Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah did about having the rookie quarterback contract advantage, which is ultimately why J.J. McCarthy ended up with the job instead of Sam Darnold. It was very clear from his comments early on as a GM that Kwesi wanted that. That's the way that they push. And I wanted that too, because it's a huge advantage. So we talked about it a lot as being a big edge to be able to spend on the rest of your roster and have the rookie quarterback contract. It's just things have changed a little bit to make it easier for teams to have veteran quarterbacks and work around them with cap flexibility, contract structures, and then a middle range of quarterbacks. Even when Kwesi got here, there was no middle range of quarterbacks, but now there's become that because of the contracts that people like, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield signed. So that might make it easier for the Vikings to potentially pick up a different quarterback and focus on the rest of the roster. And I could fully understand if people say, I don't want the headache. I just want this team to focus on as many draft picks as possible, stack the roster as deep as possible, and don't worry about, players who are coming out in a supplemental draft after, having this huge red flag. BM says, I'm gaining an irresponsible level of anticipation for the tenor and attitude of our offensive line. Yes. And by the way, we could shift the conversation whatever way you want. I mean, we've covered the Sorsby thing. I'm certainly good with going back and forth on that and continuing it. But if you've got other thoughts, like questions about the team, feel free. And this actually ties into when you're talking about the offensive line. I know Alec wrote about it, and I'm intrigued by it. I don't really trust my own ability to look at what's happening in minicamp and say that, they're back, folks, but it's really more about a health issue than it is about minicamp. It looked like Keith Carter was pushing those guys pretty hard in minicamp, and that's, fine. But to me, it's much more of a health issue of Christian Darrisaw did a lot and looked like he was moving really well and said that he feels like this is the best his knee has felt since before he got injured. That's really big. Will Fries looked like he was in better shape than he was last year. You could see that he had dropped a couple of pounds there, and they need him to be a little more mobile and have, a little bit better in terms of quickness, and also build up his body to be ready to play an effective 17 games, which last year I think it hurt him that he had that long recovery from the leg issue. And, I mean, Blake Brandel, we'll see. There's no way to pick up from minicamp, like what that's going to be. But Donovan Jackson coming into his second year is also an exciting proposition because he made so many fans within the franchise last year. This is something that, I'm pretty good at over the years of faint praise versus real praise. And I've told you guys the secret to that is just listen to how specific it is, right? If someone says of a young player, like, yeah, I mean, he's coming to work every day and he's doing the best he can, like, that's not really going to tell you what's going on. But if someone says, hey, we were blown away by Donovan Jackson, by the way that he picked up on things and quickly made adjustments and his toughness and his physical play, like those are specifics. So combined with what I've seen from him, I tend to believe it. I agree with you that this offensive line, not just when healthy, because that's always a caveat, but also the fact that they have some depth. Ryan Vandemark is ginormous, which I know is the only way to evaluate an offensive lineman, but I mean, he's a huge guy, and I think younger as well than what we've seen from their previous couple of swing tackles. I think there should be a lot of good feeling about where the offensive line is at. And then you draft Caleb Tiernan, who is a well-developed prospect with a lot of playing under his feet at Northwestern and a really excellent athlete who might be able to kick inside. I still have some concerns about guard because if someone gets hurt, are you playing? I mean, Henry Bird has been on this team for a few years, but he's never played. Are you doing that? Walter Rouse looks like he's kicking inside, but he's never played guard before. So, Joker says, Mahomes at least had the obvious big arm. You could see it easily working. Trubisky wasn't impressive at all. I was in on Watson. So that draft, there is a tweet somewhere, which the function of searching old tweets has gotten a lot harder on Twitter, but there is a tweet somewhere where I said, that I thought Mahomes was going to be the best quarterback in the draft class. So I did get that one. I missed it on Josh Rosen and many others through the years, but I did get that one. I thought that Mahomes was playing in a cartoony type of silly offense and that Texas Tech was not very good as a football team and he just did everything. Where Trubisky never blew me away. I mean, he looked like, he's a pretty good athlete, but he wasn't a great athlete. He was pretty accurate, but he wasn't crazy accurate, right? So I just kind of didn't think that he was going to be as good. So I got that one. I also, Watson, yes. I mean, he coming out and then he looked like a franchise quarterback immediately and then the whole thing happened. But could you say that could have been foreseen? Yes. But also there's a lot of sloppiness when it comes to Mahomes' tape. And you might have said, yeah, he's just kind of a backyard quarterback and it's going to take us a lot to teach him how to play. But it's an all-time blunder for sure. Yeah, it's an all-time blunder. Doesn't mean that Ryan Pace can't help the Minnesota Vikings, but it is an all-time. If you make that mistake, it's going to carry with you forever. I mean, just like the Vikings GM who traded for Herschel Walker, they did a lot of good things and built a lot of good teams, but that's the one that's always going to be connected with you. Dan, have you ever had a player get mad at you for a question or an article? Yeah. From time to time. Yeah, not like in a, we're going to fight or something. That did happen once early in my career when I was covering hockey that I asked the question in probably not the best way, but there was a player who was supposed to have like real physicality to him and was supposed to be a big hitter and fighter and all that sort of stuff back when that was really important. And I just asked him like where that was, like, why haven't we seen it? And he got really mad at that. And, that kind of turned into a whole thing. And he probably went over the top on that. I mean, I wasn't like calling out his manhood. I just, it was a reasonable question of like, isn't this supposed to be part of your game? But he did not take it too well. So that was a memorable one that I definitely could have framed the question a heck of a lot better. I mean, that was literally like my first year ever covering any sport at all. So now I would have thought it out a lot better because a lot of times you just get farther and people want this all the time. Why aren't you yelling at KOC or whatever? You often get farther by just asking in the most matter-of-fact kind of way questions or in a way that sort of sets them up to take it wherever they want to take it. So that's usually a lot better than like trying to attack someone and putting them on the defensive. And a lot of times they already know that the question is coming. In football, not much. The Vikings have always been great, like as far as players and everything else, because football players, they already have seen all the criticism by the time we even arrive, it feels like, and are sort of usually ready for it. And also every loss that they've ever had in their entire careers, they've just gotten ripped apart by everyone. Like this goes for college. If you went to Alabama and you lost the game, everyone would just destroy you for the entire week. And that's what happens in the NFL. But your coaches are destroying you. Your family's upset. Everybody online has already called you the worst things possible. So when I walk in and ask what happened on 3rd and 7, it's really not as much of what they've already seen and gone through. And most of these guys, especially in the KOC locker room, have been very, just very respectful of what our jobs are. So it doesn't happen much. I've had a few times where early on when I started using PFF stats, there were some players who, let's just say, had some questions about those and maybe didn't love that those were in there, but not in like a we're going to fight kind of way, just more of a like, those grades or whatever. But now, again, they're so commonplace that you don't see a whole lot of that. I've always had very good experiences in the locker room. Joker says, does Sorsby, this is funny. You're named Joker for a reason. Does Sorsby remind Kevin O'Connell of Kevin O'Connell? If yes, we'll overdraft him so KO can prove that he could have been a starting quarterback. That's funny. That's funny. Well, yeah, you can tell with Kevin O'Connell how bad he wanted it. He clearly wanted so badly to be a good NFL starting quarterback. And I do think, though, there is something there with O'Connell that, not to get like psychological about this, but I do think with O'Connell that he felt like when he was in the NFL that he did not have the best experience in terms of how people poured into him, developed him, encouraged him, that kind of thing. And that maybe he could have been a longer term quarterback in the league had he had a little more direction. So I think that O'Connell wants to give as much direction as he possibly can to quarterbacks. And a part of this, I definitely had this thought that if Mike Zimmer was the coach, we would not be talking about a quarterback competition. JJ McCarthy would have been put in a boat and pushed off into Lake Minnetonka and said, good luck swimming back. I think that's how it would have been handled by Mike Zimmer. So I think that the fact that JJ McCarthy is getting the opportunity that he's getting, or the fact that they brought in Daniel Jones, or they've had these other projects, maybe even Sam Howell to some extent, but like Daniel Jones for sure, where O'Connell, if he sees something in a quarterback, he wants to give them every possible chance. Josh Dobbs, there was a comment that he made about that, like giving him a chance. Jaron Hall, like believing in him a little bit too much, maybe believing in Brosmer a little bit too much, like all those things, they play into it. I think that that's true. Now, would you rather have someone who cares a lot about that quarterback position and believes in guys a little more than he should than maybe Mike Zimmer, who hated most of them other than Teddy and Sam Bradford? I don't know. It's probably better in general. And I would think about this, like this came to mind early when KOC was a coach, where I said to my wife at some point, like, man, when I was playing sports growing up, as a little league and junior high and high school and everything else, like, man, I wish I had a coach like Kevin O'Connell rather than some of the negative coaches that I had that were just, kind of old school and beat you down and everything else. It made sports not very fun with those coaches. So I think there's certainly this idea from O'Connell that, yeah, if you give everybody the most positive, reinforcement, you try your best with everyone, it's certainly not going to work every time, but it's probably going to work more than just driving them crazy. And I think we saw that with Kirk Cousins, that, Cousins, well, his performance wasn't massively different. He was definitely more comfortable in leadership spots, in clutch spots. You could see that that sort of belief permeated. And I think it did for Sam Darnold as well. So you'd much rather have that, him believing too much than not enough and wanting to bail on everyone. Norm Snead, Bob Lee, and Gary Quazzo back in the 70s. Yes, that's what I mean, is 70s, 80s, even into the early 90s, but it really ended in the 90s, which I don't know why exactly, where teams would just bench quarterbacks at halftime. And even if you were the franchise quarterback, if you were playing like crap, they would just bench you. So that hasn't happened. Mark just popped in to say no. Well, Mark, you got to listen to the argument before you just say no. You can't be so dismissive. But if you have something else you want to talk about, we can. Joker, Teddy. Oh, you're saying Teddy 2.0 for Sorsby? Is that what you're talking about? Teddy didn't start year one? Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. It wasn't the first game. He came in against Atlanta off the bench and played really well. Bob says it'll be Kyler if he plays good for next year. And, this is something that I want to do a lot more on. And maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Is just like, how good though? Like, how good does he need to be? How good does McCarthy have to be for either one of those guys to either win the job or be the quarterback in 2027? Axton, if we don't win at least 2 playoff games this year, we should trade for Burrow at that point. This endless game of quarterback roulette is getting old. Yeah, I mean, of course they should trade for Burrow if that ever becomes a chance to do. You have to do it. Something also I'm working on for next week is 50 predictions for the 2026 NFL season. So look, these are hard days. These are hard days at the Purple Insider Factory. Well, I sit there and try to ponder how good the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be. So, pray for me when it comes to that. But I did spend a lot of time looking around and reading and trying to figure out what I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be. More time than was reasonable to do. And I did come up with the conclusion that I think the Bengals are going to be good and Burrow's going to stay there. That's the conclusion that I came to because they've got the weapons. They've improved their offensive line from years past. They've improved their defense. And the division is just not very good. The Ravens were an average team last year. I think they'll be a lot better this year under Jesse Minter, but we don't know how much better. Lamar Jackson presumably will be healthier, but Lamar always seems kind of perpetually banged up. The Steelers, I think, are going to be bad. I don't think that's going to be good at all. With Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin always found a way to drag his team to 9-8. I don't know that Mike McCarthy has that same skill that Mike Tomlin had, and I definitely don't think that Aaron Rodgers has it back. Cleveland could lose every single game. I mean, if they're starting Watson and they're playing Shadur Sanders and they don't have Myles Garrett, they could lose 15 or more. So if you're Cincinnati, you could win 12. I would pick Cincinnati to win 12 and keep Joe Burrow, but if they don't, then it could happen. Hans says Sorsby is fine, but doesn't look like a prospect you'd expect to be a top 10 starter, so pass. That's the interesting thing about this is like teams have to figure out how high they think the ceiling is for Sorsby because what we really needed, so he shows flashes last year. What we really needed is another year of college. Because when I was doing FanDuel Question of the Day and I'm going through CJ Carr, is this odds? And Lenora Sellers, is this odds? And so forth. It's like, we don't really have an idea of what any of those quarterbacks is going to be at the end of the 2026 season. Because we thought that Garrett Nussmeier and Drew Aller were going to compete for first or second round quarterbacks. Sorsby does not have physical traits that blow your mind, but he does have good physical traits. And when you're talking about, is he the type of prospect you'd project as a top 10 starter? You're probably right. Like if we try to think about like what every one of these guys has, like could he be Dak Prescott maybe? But Prescott is very, very accurate. And that hasn't really been his thing. That might be the strongest argument is if you just don't think he could be that great. But we also don't know if there's another step there for him to take or if he's just sort of another guy. And teams will have to determine that when they decide to put in whatever bid. And his agent's trying to push obviously as hard as he can that he's going to be a second round draft pick and all that with the supplemental draft. I don't know about that. That just seems to be too high for me. I guess if somebody does it, well, congratulations to them. But I mean, that's a fair argument. In my mind, if you got a quarterback who could even start 4 games for you, it was worth a fifth. And when we talk about controversy, like it's only controversy if he decides to do this again. It's not like there's a controversy of him doing something in the public, or, whatever else, the other things that come up sometimes. This is more of an issue with himself and a gambling addiction. And if he turned out to be a good backup quarterback and then it happened again and he got suspended, you sort of just shrug your shoulders, I guess. But there is a concern though, if he becomes your starting quarterback and he actually turns out to be really good, and then that happens, you are just completely screwed. Derek, thanks for the live streams. Yeah. Oh, no, it is always easy, Derek. It is always easy. Thank you for watching. It is always easy to turn this on and talk football for a while is always easy and always enjoyable. So I really appreciate everybody popping in. I mean, look, it's June 17th. There's not a whole lot of NFL news at this point, but also all of us want to talk about football. So here we are. Orion says Kyler Murray for 2027, unless McCarthy can beat him out, assuming that he doesn't this year. Next year. Oh, well, that's a question. If Murray beats him out, does that mean that, he's still going to be on the team, or will they trade him? Somebody asked me the other day, and I was going to dive into this, like a pie chart of just when McCarthy could be traded. And part of the pie chart would be never. So I think the 4 options for the person's pie chart who wrote me were, when could he be traded, was the beginning of training camp, like early on in training camp, at the end of training camp, sometime within the season, or after the season, or never. So I guess there was 5 options, or maybe it was just after. No. Sorry. It was after training camp was the first option. And then it was like trade deadline sometime in the season was the second option. After the season was the third, and never was the fourth. And I guess what I came up with there was that him not being traded is still the most likely thing for me. It doesn't really make a heck of a lot of sense to have a deep quarterback room with a quarterback who has had some injuries and just say, all right, we're going to trade you to Arizona or whatever, the Jets. Why would you do that when you know that McCarthy can win some games? I mean, that's an important part of this. He works for you. His contract is for you, and he can win some games. And Carson Wentz, if he came in for more than 3 or 4 games, he could win a couple, but there's probably not a long term to that. So if Kyler Murray was 7-3 and then got hurt for the season, well, you have a quarterback that could get you to 11, being JJ McCarthy. I think he's got a better chance to get you there because he is a playmaker and he is a scrambler than it would be for Carson Wentz to go the rest of the way. I think Carson Wentz could play 2 games or 3, but the amount he holds on to the football, the amount of times he takes sacks, it's really tough to see 7 games out of Carson Wentz, but you could see it certainly out of JJ McCarthy. So I don't like the idea of trading him away. So for not trading him away would be like a 40% for me, or a 50% is just not trading him and just keeping him on the roster and be ready. And I think he'll play. If Kyler wins the job, I think that JJ McCarthy will play at some point during the season. Just because, and Murray did play 30 games in a row before getting hurt this year, but things happen in an NFL season. Even Sam Darnold got banged up a couple times and Nick Mullins had to come in. So you want somebody who's ready there for that if it happens. 50% for he doesn't get traded at all. I think I would go maybe after camp would be the next highest. And I would go maybe 30% that happens, because you could see something like, hey, well, man, maybe now I'm messing up a pie chart. Now I'm like getting in Courtney Cronin territory of messing up pie chart. That 30 is probably too high. 20, let's go 20 after training camp. Because if Kyler Murray beats him out and McCarthy then is just so unhappy, his agent's calling them every day, he's done, he's sitting on the sideline, like he's not trying at practice, he's just given up on the Minnesota Vikings and they've given up on him, and then they trade him away. Again, I don't really see that happening, so I'm going to go with 20% there. I would go probably like 10% at the trade deadline. Someone would have to be hurt, and the Vikings would have to be super confident in Kyler and Carson Wentz. So that leaves me with 20% left, I think, maybe, to be after the end of the season. 50, 70. No, I think I only got 10%. Maybe 10% after the season should be higher though, because if they go through the entire season and love Kyler, then you do it. So let me now rewind again. Now I think I got to change my pie chart. This has been, none of you even asked for this pie chart, and this has been like my worst one ever. I think I want to make it 40% they just don't trade him at all, and he plays out his rookie contract here in some way or the other. And the next highest would be after this season. If Kyler is really good, then I might go, 30% there to get to 70% so that they get to the end of the season. They love Kyler. He's the quarterback. You trade away JJ McCarthy. That seems reasonable. And then split the other 30% between after camp and at the trade deadline. Okay. I'm glad that we worked through that together and all of you didn't just log out, but I think that that's right, isn't it? Or should it be higher? I think it's better to just play out his rookie contract, but maybe it should be higher. Give me opinions on this. Give me your pie chart on this. Because I think it should be higher that they just don't trade him at all. And he is a backup for next year as well. But, now that I think about it, maybe it makes sense that if Kyler wins the job, then they trade McCarthy at the end of the year if they feel like they're going to sign Kyler. But then again, that bakes in that Kyler would have to win the job and be good enough to be re-signed. So I'm going to say I'm comfortable with my pie chart. 40% he doesn't get traded on his rookie deal. 30% he's traded after this year. And then 15 each on deadline and before the season. Hopefully you do better than I did. Camps on the Sorsby thing says nothing has worked. Take a swing. I think that's a fair enough attitude. Steven, who is the odd man out because the Vikings cannot roster. What did you mean to say there? Four. Yeah, you meant four. You mean five quarterbacks? I mean, they could put, Max Brosmer on the practice squad. It would be Brosmer, but they could just put him on the practice squad. And you're right though, they could roster four, but that would be a little bit on the tricky side, except for the fact that just everyone makes it to the practice squad these days. So if you had four quarterbacks on your roster, did they have that with Daniel Jones, right? Or did they not? Did they have four quarterbacks on the roster when Daniel Jones was here? Or was it just three? Camp's a good left guard. It's been too long. Yeah, I know. I spent most of the time covering the team talking about the left guard. And I think Donovan Jackson is headed in a really good place in the NFL. Does that mean he's going to be a Hall of Famer? I don't know, but I think he could be a really good starter for a long time. Kit, it's been some positive offhand comments about Hockenson. What do you think we can expect for him in a prove-it year? Yeah, TJ Hockenson looked sharp to me in just moving around out there. It's mini camp, so everyone should look pretty good when they're NFL players. But more than anything, more than what he looked like in mini camp was, and I guess I'd call it spry, I suppose, but more than just what we saw in mini camp, which again was not a lot from Hockenson. I would say just that what we've seen from Kyler Murray and the way he plays quarterback, that Kyler does have a lower average depth of target. And a lot of the reason for that is not necessarily that he's afraid to throw down the field, but when you watch the Arizona games, there's one guy he trusts, and it's that tight end that, Trey McBride is the guy that he was very comfortable leaning on. And as I watched more of the Cardinals last 2 years, there's so many concepts that TJ Hockenson does. And one of them is just find some space and sit there. That there's a lot of little timing routes with Trey McBride and Kyler Murray where it's a zone coverage and McBride just takes off and he just finds space and turns around and the ball is there. Because I did think that Murray you could tell when he was confident in something where the timing was very good and where he wasn't sure and was still learning the offense and the timing wasn't as good. But in terms of how fast he was operating in minicamp, I think on plays that he was confident, it looked really good. So those are the types of timing things with the tight end that McCarthy really struggled with. And I also think McCarthy last year was trying so hard to hit home runs and to hit deep passes that, and look, the plays are designed for Justin Jefferson down the field. So I get it. But there were so many times where you watch the tape back and you go, can you just check the ball down to TJ Hockenson, please? Can you just just check it down? Because that will get you probably 9 yards. I think Kyler Murray really understands that. So if Kyler ends up being the starter, which is what we're still projecting right now, I think that could be big for TJ Hockenson. Bob says the scouts don't really know because Brady was the sixth and Purdy was dead last. No, that's absolutely true. Most of the time they do. Most of the time the scouts get it right. The first round quarterbacks are the ones who become the stars. And when you look at the playoffs, almost every single quarterback that was in there except Brock Purdy was a first round draft pick. more likely than not, the next Minnesota Vikings quarterback is going to be a first-round pick, whether he's already here with the 2 first-round picks or whether it's the next first-round pick that they spend or whether it's someone else's first-round pick who ends up here next year like Baker Mayfield or Trevor Lawrence or someone like that. That's just the reality of the league. I mean, if you're even halfway decent at this, it's going to happen. But I think as it relates to Sorsby, that there would be the idea that he could be. Like that if he had stayed on his current trajectory, he could be that first round talent. And some people have said that and other people have, disagreed. Eric says, prefer they look at the draft if JJ and Kyler don't work out. It's interesting that Teasley comes from Seattle where they won 2 Super Bowls with a 3rd rounder and a free agent quarterback. Yeah, totally. That is certainly interesting that, believing in building the deepest possible roster. Would you try someone else's quarterback? Would you try to stick with Kyler Murray? Like that background is absolutely relevant when we're having this conversation about what they might do in 2027 is like, would he believe in, also not only that, but one with a short quarterback as well, that they just built a behemoth roster around in Russell Wilson. And it wasn't just one Super Bowl. They were in another one where if you just hand off to Marshawn Lynch, you win. They were in the playoffs consistently with Russell Wilson working around some of his shortcomings, building up his strengths. Like, do they think that could be the case with Kyler Murray? Or, might he look at it and say, well, there's somebody else on the market that we could go get that's a better fit for our offense, and we'll give it a try. Like, I don't know. In a world where 2 years ago, Sam Darnold was just a roll of the dice, whatever, backup type of quarterback, and somebody with some high-end skill, and now he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, like things change that fast. Maybe there is some belief from Teasley that you could take somebody else's quarterback that they've developed over some years, pick them up, bring them in. I don't know, rather than spending a first-round draft pick. I think what it's going to depend on, and I gave you the list of guys that are considered to be potential first-round draft picks here. Can you guys see that? Let's see. So on FanDuel here, Arch Manning. Actually, did that change while we were talking? Arch Manning plus 200. Maybe I just read it wrong. Plus 200 and Dante Moore. So let's say the Vikings can't get him, but Dante Moore is plus 380. CJ Carr is plus 500. Julian Sayin is plus 1400. There's a lot of quarterbacks that could potentially be first rounders, and it only takes the Vikings liking one and then have him be in the right area of the draft for them to decide it's worth the first round pick. But there is so much value in not having to spend your first round draft pick on a quarterback, because then you could get an edge rusher. You could get a wide receiver, as some people always beg them to get. If you're not buying Jordan Addison for the future, a tight end because you're losing TJ Hawkinson, and maybe they would have drafted Kenyon Sadiq this year. I don't know. Another defensive tackle, a top cornerback. Like, there's a lot of things that this team could use into the future that you'd love to spend that first round draft pick on if you're not spending it on a quarterback. So you'd have to be really sold on that idea. And then it has to match up with your timeline, because if you draft, let's just say, Julian Sayin with your first round pick, then he's not going to come in and win 12 games right away. Like, you'd have to start planning that for how do you work through this a year out or 2 years out to maximize your roster. So all these things are moving targets. Dave says, not one of those crazy JJ defenders, but I think JJ's the starter in 2027. His last comments indicate that he really wants to be in Minnesota and has the talent to improve. Yeah, calm down, Dave, you psycho. No, I think that's a rational take. I don't know how likely it is, because first he has to win the job or at least get in. But there's a lot of scenarios where this could happen. There's a lot of scenarios where he could not even win the job and still end up in the game. And so I'm going to do a whole thing on this tomorrow. We're going to do it tomorrow. The bar for JJ McCarthy and Kyler Murray to meet. But I think that the bar, just a little preview of that, is a little lower for McCarthy to be the starter in 2027 for his 2026 performance. Because if he's seen as an ascending quarterback, that if he comes in and plays much, much better, then finding out what you have there in 2027 would be a lot more interesting. If you felt like, wow, he gave us the 17th best quarterback play in the league, can he get to 12th? Like that, can he get there? That would really be the question, right? So I don't think it's crazy to project that could happen, that, Murray is going to play 8 games and then get hurt, or that, they're just not that impressed with Murray and they decide to just stick with JJ McCarthy into the future. Like those are things, pie chartable, I guess, things. But since I botched it so badly, I'm not going to try another one tonight, but it's definitely not a crazy thing. I'm sure that he wants to be the starting quarterback of this organization. I mean, he was welcomed in by the locker room. I think the locker room still likes him a lot. And, those guys have supported JJ McCarthy a ton. The franchise did. I think Kevin O'Connell giving him this chance, despite how he played, is maybe more than some coaches would do based on his performance. And historically, I'm just talking historically, quarterbacks who play like this don't get a lot more time. So even getting a quarterback competition here is, I think, favorable to McCarthy being able to, prove himself. So yeah, making that prediction is not crazy, Dave. You psycho. Phil says, I know the Wonderlic isn't around anymore, but I have trouble believing a guy who can't get to his second read and would bet on his own sports team has a very high score. Yeah, Phil, I get where you're coming from then. Although just both of those things. Number one is addiction can happen to anybody. So it can happen with, drugs. It can happen with a lot of different stuff. That's something that you could fall into and think, I would never be the person who would do that. Shopping, I don't know, right? Watching old football games. It's happened to me. It could happen to you. This is a PSA that the other night I was spending a lot of time watching 2009 Steelers versus Titans. There was no reason for that. But no, in all seriousness, like I truly think this is an ailment that someone suffers from that, is being treated from him, but you don't know about the question there. I don't think it's an IQ thing. I think plenty of smart people become addicted to things. The second read thing matters, how much that can be taught. He's only really, I think, right? He's only really started one season. So, he's not like a super experienced quarterback. That's what it's going to be hard. That's why he would be viewed as a development player. He would not be viewed as like a franchise saving quarterback. Joker says, the 49ers in nuclear hot pursuit of Max Crosby, huh? Vikings should be even hotter. Bleep them picks. You're back to the bleep them picks thing, huh, Joker? Should the Vikings try to go after Max Crosby? What is the price? I don't like some of the indicators statistically from Max Crosby. A couple of years ago, oh my gosh, holy cow. Like he is an absolute freak monster, psycho, one of the best, like playing at the same level as almost of Myles Garrett. That has not really been the case recently, and he's been playing through injury, and that's concerning. And another team who traded for him decided he was too injured and sent him back. All that sort of stuff is some serious red flags. When it comes to what you would give up, I just have a tough time. Like he's on the older side, and yeah, I know you want to go all in on this team. I don't blame you for that. Is that the right move for Nolan Teasley to start giving away draft picks? It just seems like very, very old Vikings of you do something really exciting and it's great and everyone is very pumped, but it's not going to be enough to really get you over the hump. This one player. Now, if Crosby was the guy from 3 years ago who can get 80 pressures, then maybe he does get you over the hump. And maybe if the price is only a third round pick, which it won't be, I don't think. I think it's going to be probably a first round draft pick or maybe a second because he's got the injury. I wouldn't do a second for somebody who's on the older side. Yeah, you're taking one more big shot at it here, but you don't even know what's going to happen at quarterback. This is something that I would wait on. I think that it's smarter for Nolan Teasley to wait until the trade deadline and see who's available rather than rolling the dice on somebody who's had a lot of injuries and their production is not quite what it used to be. Dave questioning a hockey player's physicality. Yeah, I know that I discovered that in my early career that questioning their physicality, though I will say this, the player was traded not too long after that because the team wasn't too happy with his commitment. I'm just saying this was in the minor leagues. So, just saying, like, I think I identified the right issue. It's just that I could have gone about it in a different way. Like I was trying to be like, I'm going to be the super aggressive reporter kind of thing. And, I've learned since then that you get farther with being a little more, just professional about the way you ask the question and a little more understanding. you get better answers that way. Even if when the people watch back the press conference, you're like, well, why didn't you really go after him? Like, well, I'm trying to get more. I'm not trying to get him more angry. So Axton says, do you get a chance to look at the top college quarterbacks that'll be available for next year's draft? Who is your pick? Manning, Moore. Yeah, that was the water boy. That's funny. Yeah, that was the FanDuel question of the day, was looking at those. As of right now, I'm not, I really don't know. I don't know, because every year, I'll tell you who I like the best of this group right now is Julian Sayin. Sayin is not a physical freak, and that may put some people off because there's a lot of physical freaks who win in the NFL, but I see a lot of anticipation and accuracy with Julian Sayin. And, you know, it's funny because the way he played against Indiana, where he had some struggles in that game, he was like, oh man, how could he lose to that team? And then it turned out Indiana's defense was amazing and they win the national championship. I like his accuracy. I know Ohio State quarterbacks always are throwing to these great wide receivers, and they have good offensive linemen who get drafted, and it's a factor. But I think in terms of like who has the most obvious pro accuracy, it's probably him. Even though he doesn't have some of the freakish talents that you see from a Lenora Sellers. I just don't really like Lenora Sellers very much. Moore is one that I'm going to be watching very closely because I was not blown away by him, but I also think that there is another step to his game. His accuracy is very good. He put up huge numbers. So I'm kind of interested in him. CJ Carr, I just have not watched. Maybe one game I saw of his last year. I was kind of looking at their running backs at Notre Dame last year. So I can't tell you right now but here's what I do wonder. If at any point during this season, we are on here having a discussion about these quarterbacks. I mean, right now, of course we should. Like, hey, is this a good quarterback class? Who are we intrigued by going into next year? All those sorts of things in the draft. But as we go throughout the season, are the Vikings 3-5? And we're saying, oh man, here we go. Starting to look at those draftable quarterbacks again, or do we never end up having that discussion? Joker pie chart request. Okay, I'll try again. This year, Kyler Murray sticks to his reads longer and is more willing to take hits. Who or what gets credit? Kyler Murray, Kevin O'Connell, Arizona versus Minnesota difference, contract year boost. So you're saying that, you know, Kyler Murray plays better from the pocket, sticks with his reads. I mean, I don't want him taking a lot of hits. I'd rather he just be in the game, but I see what you're saying. Like, he stays in the pocket more, he scrambles less. It's been a big criticism of him. Who ends up getting the credit? I think that Kevin O'Connell would get a lot of credit. I would probably go with Kevin O'Connell getting 40% credit because the quarterback whisperer thing would be back on. Like, it's off, they screwed it up, but now it's back on. He's whispering again. So I think that would be 40%. I would also go with maybe 30%, the difference between the Vikings and Arizona. Arizona is a laughingstock. And so that puts me at 70, 20% to Kyler Murray because it is true that environment matters. But here's what I learned from the Sam Darnold thing. What I learned from the Sam Darnold thing is that when the masses decide on something, they will not change their mind until the guy is literally holding a Lombardi trophy. That even going into the dang Super Bowl, there's people being like, I don't know, man, like he sees ghosts. Like, he's in the Super Bowl. He just outplayed Matthew Stafford in the NFC Championship, and the guy's won 28 games over the last 2 years, and you're still saying that? Like, so I think people will still say, like, oh, Murray's not that good. It's just O'Connell. It's just the contract boost. So I think O'Connell and the Vikings organization, Jefferson, would probably get the majority of the credit and not Kyler Murray. But one thing we know for absolutely sure in the NFL is that every quarterback is a product of their environment. I mean, gosh, like John Elway was a great quarterback in the 80s and he got teams to the Super Bowl, but he didn't win a Super Bowl until he had Terrell Davis and Mike Shanahan and this great offense and everything else. Like, there's so many examples of that yes, there's greatness. Yes, there are people who elevate, Mahomes, of course. Mahomes did have Andy Reid's one of the greatest coaches ever. Tyreek Hill is one of the greatest deep threats ever. It's like none of these guys just do it on their own entirely. And yet so often we treat it like, yeah, well, that's just who you are. Whatever your stat sheet says from last year, that's who you are. And that is just not true. Historically, it's just not true. And that was Sam Darnold. Like, who Sam Darnold was before he got here was not who Sam Darnold has become. And I think growth also, that's the other thing we never give people credit for. And this could be a JJ McCarthy point too, is that whoever you were when you were, I mean, especially guys in their 20s, whoever you were at 20 is not who you were at 24. Whoever you were at 24 is not who you were at 28. Like, it's one of the biggest areas of growth in a person's life is from 20 to 28. And we act like, well, you know, the guy played video games too much when he was a kid, so that's it. That's who he is forever. It's like he's a totally different person at this point. But we're going to find out, I guess, how prepared Murray is going to be for the offense. The pie chart is making you hungry. Yeah, well, that's what it's meant for. Bob said would keep JJ through this year. Well, yeah, and I think that too. Like, he's on his rookie contract, and we know he can get into games and win. So why would you trade him away unless it just gets really toxic? Joker says Christian Ponder played out his rookie contract with the Vikings. Have to assume that we'll do that with McCarthy. Unless somebody came with a good offer. But even like Anthony Richardson, no one's offering anything good for Anthony Richardson. So the Colts are just saying, whatever, man, we'll just keep him. And if he's got to play, he's got to play. Axton says we keep McCarthy. Kyler is a bit injury prone. Yeah, I mean, I don't think injury prone is fair for McCarthy or for Kyler. I don't think that word prone is right because we have to be specific about these things. He had an ACL tear, which can happen to anybody. And then he missed back half of a season and the front half of a season with the same injury. So it's like, well, he hasn't played this many games and this. Yeah, but it spanned 2 years. And then he played 30 games in a row after he came back from the ACL. And then he had this foot issue that would have kept him out a few weeks, and then he would have come back had they not benched him to tank. So I don't know if that's quite injury prone. There is an injury history, but I wouldn't say prone. But I think it's a good argument to keep JJ McCarthy. The quarterback injuries happen, and we've seen it from multiple quarterbacks. Orion says, hope he gets another opportunity before it's all said and done. Yeah, I think that there is a really good chance that he will. I mean, if we were doing like pie chart of how many games McCarthy plays, as we're like really pie charting it up here, I would probably go with maybe 2 to 4 would be my highest percentage that he ends up getting in for a certain number of games when Kyler gets banged up and has a chance to show what he can do. Kit says you have to build in whatever small chance that he wins the job. Yeah, and I was trying to do that like on the fly, and I wasn't doing a good job of it. Plus the chance that they don't trade him as a backup. So 65% in total in terms of the trade, 65% total that they trade. Yeah. See, the math got complicated on this pie chart. It wasn't just me. 65% chance that they traded, 5% in camp, 15 after camp, 7.5 for each after the season, 5% he wins the job. So, and 60% he stays as a backup. So I mean, your math is convoluted. So was mine. But at the end of the day, it's after the season. If he does not win the job, then that would be where you would consider it. If you are locked dead on Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy is getting a bunch of trade phone calls. But again, this is the exact Colts situation. They haven't traded Anthony Richardson. So you have no reason to trade someone who's so cheap as a backup quarterback, as long as it's not a tough situation. How tall was Wilson? I think he was 5'11". I think so. 5'11". Orion, you're already looking at next year's pick, Texas edge Colin Simmons. I mean, edge is a big position, I think, for this team in the future. If you can have Dallas Turner and then Andrew Van Ginkel goes and you've got a Jake Golday, but then bring in someone else who's an edge. Corner is a position I'll be watching, but that's a long way off. Scott finally read football as a numbers game. Kicked ass. Waited too long to see it. Well, thank you very much, Scott. And if you get a chance, if you bought it on Amazon, leave a little review there. Always helps more people find the book, but it's right behind me on my right here. Yeah, my right. And I would be honored if anybody checked it out. Football is a numbers game. I'm really happy that you read it. And it always makes me feel really good about it, Scott. It was a long process of writing it. And as I was writing it, the main thing was, okay, I know I'm not going to become the next Michael Lewis. I'm not going to be like a millionaire book writer or anything like that. This is a labor of love. And I know it's very, very niche, but I want the people who read it to enjoy it. So anytime somebody goes out of their way to say that they did, it means a lot to me. So thank you very much, Scott. Mama, Crosby is on the edge of being washed. His injuries worry me. Yeah, now see, that's the thing. When you talk about injury prone, somebody who's constantly on the injury report, always playing through injuries the last couple of years, and then a trade falls through because of injuries, that's more injury prone. I would be afraid of doing a deal for Max Crosby. 12-16, how will he get any practice time in 2026 with Murray, McCarthy, and Wentz? You're talking about Sorsby. Well, he would have to be on kind of his own plan. And he might be suspended. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But the same thing would go for someone like Max Brosmer. Like, he's not going to get reps with the ones, the twos, or whatever. But every day you would be coming to work in an NFL building and going out on an NFL field and throwing and working with the coaches and trying to improve your game every single week. And you would probably get a ton of preseason time. That would be another thing, that you could get a ton of preseason time. And I mean, you could play all 3 games in preseason and develop there. I think there's a lot of value to developing in practice, developing skills, working with coaches, understanding the league better, and all those sorts of things. Is it as good as playing a full season at Texas Tech? Probably not, but you're also learning how it actually works in the league. So yeah, I mean, he would not be getting like top reps or anything. Whoever is the practice squad quarterback, or the not the practice squad, but the what do they call it? The person who helps the defense. Why am I blanking on that? But who's ever doing the QB2 duties to practice against the starting defense, that's not what a Sorsby would be doing. But it doesn't mean you can't develop. I mean, you can work after practice, you can work with receivers, you can work with coaches, and we see someone like Max Brosmer do this every day. And then, you assume that after this year, then he probably still is not going to be someone you make your starting quarterback. So this would be like a 3-year type of decision. It wouldn't be just, hey, you get him and he's your starter. I don't think. Hans says, can't go all in on Crosby without a quarterback set. Not even the Vikings would do this. Well, they may be mostly set, depending on how much they believe they're not. Could dictate something like that. Also might dictate it of how much Nolan Teasley thinks this team could really win. But if you're Teasley, why would you do it right now? I mean, you want to see what you have. This, I think, is important for Nolan Teasley to just wait and see what he has. And things will pop up at the trade deadline if you need to do it there. Axton says the lean for me on Crosby is no. There were rumors that the Ravens changed their mind on Crosby because of too much weed smoking. Could be. I thought it was a knee issue. Maybe that's it. I'm not sure. He did do a rap song, if you guys saw that, which was not for me, I guess. But, I don't know if it was, I don't know if those rumors are true that you're talking about, or it really was just a knee injury. He's a great player. Are you in a position to do this right now? As you said, like, there is no clear-cut quarterback. You don't really know how good you can be. I'd like to see how good they can be before they make a move like this. San Francisco knows how good they can be. San Francisco knows they've got this veteran team. They've got Trent Williams in his last year. Christian McCaffrey will not be good for much longer. I mean, George Kittle just tore his Achilles. He's going to be coming back from that. They got Mike Evans. They're 1,000 years old. Why not? They should get Max Crosby. I don't think the Vikings should. Hans Drake Lindsay intrigues me, not going to lie. I'm intrigued by Drake Lindsay. I mean, he's certainly got the arm, and we saw some of the processing stuff from him last year. I know people that know Drake Lindsay from Minnesota who really love his potential and his upside, that he could surprise people and take a big step. I don't know how many people were watching the Gophers that closely last year, but he was really good. Mama says, hope we draft a first-round quarterback, get them to learn behind Baker Mayfield. I don't know how that would go over with Baker, and he's a guy that you have to make sure he's happy, I guess. Is that like technically the best way to go about it, which would be, hey, maybe you keep Kyler and draft a first-rounder? It's just, how feasible is that? LSU's quarterback, is it Sam you meant to write? Levitt? Maybe. Haven't seen him play. Wait, is that the guy who came from, correct me, he came from somewhere else where he was playing well, right? So I have seen him play. College football is not as much my thing. Oh yeah, Sam Levitt. Yeah, so he just went there, right? And he played somewhere else and was pretty good. We need a pie chart. Says if Courtney Crone is listening, she's twitching because of all the pie chart math. Yeah, well, she has no one to criticize. She struggled with the math as well. It wasn't the fact that I couldn't get the percentages right. It was really trying to work through what I wanted them to be. It wasn't that I couldn't do the math. It was, now wait a minute, couldn't they trade him here or there? That was really the issue. Joker says Andrew Luck with a better environment or at least decent O-line. And things would have turned out differently. Yeah, I understand why people don't want to let it go with Gregson. Yeah, I get that too. Why that's the reputation. And he still was great, Andrew Luck. But that's the thing about these top quarterbacks is when Luck had a good team around him, they went to the AFC Championship. And with Kyler Murray, the 1 year that they had a good team around him, he went 9-5 as a starter. They were in the playoffs and he was top 10 by PFF. It's not impossible that the better environment could make a huge difference for him. In fact, I think it's actually likely. Jared says, the only teams that I think should use higher than a 6th-round pick are the Dolphins and Cardinals. I think that's totally fair. Totally fair. Because those teams are super insanely desperate and have absolutely nothing to lose. 6th round, 5th round. Yeah. Bob, how do you get an autographed book? Send me an email, Bob. Matthew Coller, my name, MattheWColler @gmail, which any of you, if you have off-air questions, you can send me an email whenever you want. So my name @gmail, and I'll get back to you on that. I just got a couple that showed up. How do you get an autographed guitar? Well, that you have to buy a guitar and then bring it to me, and I will sign it for you. But I don't think I'm good enough at guitar to be signing those. So, all right, man. Okay, well, my wife is doing links, so if you haven't seen Olivia Miles play, it might be a good time tonight. They're out in LA, so they're just getting started, so I'm going to jump over and watch that and work on some stuff for the newsletter, purpleinsider.football, and heck, you got some good reviews here from the football as a numbers game. But tomorrow, yeah, that's my plan. My plan tomorrow is to talk about because I wrote an article about it and did some research on it, and I'm kind of interested to present that to you guys about where the bar is for McCarthy and Murray to win the starting job and then be the long-term quarterback. But as we go forward here, we'll see what pops up. I mean, this Sorsby thing, never saw it coming. Certainly didn't think that anyone in the media would connect the Vikings, but since they did, I figured we'd have a fun discussion about it. Also got Mike Kay from the Carolina Panthers, covers them, coming on the show a little later this week. So, a lot still going on, even though it's a slow time of year. And I have confirmed Mike Clay from ESPN is going to be on the show next week. So I'm excited about that because that's always a good show with him. So, but live streaming, fun talks, and this is a great time of year to get in whatever questions and comments you have. So we'll definitely see you tomorrow night. All right.